Speak on what skeptics say about the miracle and what the witnesses say about this miracle. So, what is skepticism? According to Brian Dunning, skepticism is finding a way, not a way, but a way. And he emphasizes a way. From worthless superstitions and public misinformation toward projects and ideas that are evident to be beneficial to humanity and the world. And it may not be too surprising to learn that a skeptic views the miracle of the sun more as a worthless superstition or a popular misinformation, not really something beneficial to humanity and the world. So now my first handout is a list of articles that I've used, and two of them are by this guy Dunning, and then three of them are articles on the miracle of the sun. One is a Wikipedia, and the other one is Debunking the Sun Miracle Skeptics, and the third is Top 10 Scientific Explanations of the Miracle, debunking those 10 explanations. And I also will be using Miracle of the Sun, the witnesses, where have I got? Meet the Witnesses of the Miracle of the Sun by John Hafford. He wrote a book after he interviewed all the witnesses that he interviewed for his book. And on the back are the references from Dunning's article of people who talk other skeptics, whatever. So anyway, in his Skeptoid podcast number 110, Mr. Dunning turns his attention to illuminating the Fatima miracle of the sun. He gives a brief, succinct, but accurate account of the events as they took place. And he says, how can one be skeptical of something with so many eyewitnesses, so much printed news coverage, so many photographs, and such a specific prediction? The children said it was going to happen on this day at that time, and it did. He summarizes the background of the event, the series of apparitions, the prediction to the day of the miracle, the thousands, as many as 100,000 who gathered in the rain, and then the sun coming out, dancing, changing colors, spinning like a pinwheel, and making a most sensational demonstration, such that 13 years later, the Roman Catholic Church declared that it was a miracle. He writes, it's hard to argue with the facts of the event, unless, of course, find my place. Unless, of course, you set a reasonable standard for evidence and start looking for alternative explanations. So he says, I'll start with the children's report of 6 months of religious apparitions. He refers to these reports as wild tales, concluding there are alternative explanations for the children's stories. Chief among them, imagination and boredom. Now isn't that profound? He doesn't mention the fact that the children were arrested in order to have them recant what they were their wild stories, and that they were interrogated for 2 days under the threat of death, and they still did not recant them. As to the event itself, he writes, the specific date was so widely publicized that tens of thousands of people appeared. Clearly, you're not going to make such a pilgrimage like that unless you're pretty religious and pretty confident that you're going to witness a miracle. So, we have a crowd preconditioned to see something. Simple as that. That's an alternative explanation. As to the number of people, by looking at photographs of the crowd, he is able to correct the newspaper accounts which estimated the crowd between 30 and 100,000. Looking at some photographs with his skeptical eye, he writes, "Though it does look like several thousands to me, I certainly wouldn't go as high as 30. Either the photographers chose not to show the largest part of the crowd, or the newspapers reported exaggerated numbers." You may recall that the newspapers were anti-Catholic and had tried to dissuade the public from coming. Excuse me. Regarding the reports of heavy rain, he writes, "If you do a Google image search, you'll find a lot of pictures of huge crowds, many of which show a perfectly bright and sunny day. It is always reported to have been raining quite heavily during the event, and I only found a single picture that showed a crowd with umbrellas." So, I think a snippet of skepticism is warranted when viewing these photos of large crowds staring heavenward. In truth, the reports of rain do not state that it was raining during the event. So there's no reason to expect to see umbrellas while the thousands of faces were staring heavenward. In my handouts, second one, I have two pictures that were taken moments apart. One shows the crowd with umbrellas just before noon, and then the crowd looking heavenward just after noon. He then asked how impressive was the sun's display, and he notes a lot of skeptical explanations have been put forward. I refer to his bibliography that is included on the first page of my handout, and I have included articles debunking the sun miracle skeptics, the Wikipedia article on the miracle of the sun, and so forth. After this talk, I will display several copies of each of these articles on this table, including the two by Mr. Dunning. I will also have copies of this talk. Before turning our attention to what the witnesses say about the event, I point out that one of the main messages of Fatima is that we pray for unbelievers. In 1916, the year before the miracle of the sun, the angel of peace appeared 3 times to the children. The first time in the spring, he taught them a prayer. The second time, a few months later in the fall, he appeared again asking, "What are you doing?" It seems to me that he was being indignant to find them playing instead of praying. So he said, "Pray," and he led them in the prayer again. And if you remember, he bowed down, and the children did the same. He knelt down on the ground, bowed down his forehead on the ground, and said these words, which I ask you to repeat after me. Okay? This is the prayer, and let's pray it for Mr. Dunning and other skeptics like him, and all the many people in our society, more and more becoming atheistic, unbelieving, whatever. My God.
My God.
I believe.
I believe.
I adore.
I adore.
I hope.
I hope.
And I love you.
And I love you.
I beg pardon.
I beg pardon.
For those.
For those.
Who do not believe.
Who do not believe.
Do not adore.
Do not adore.
Do not hope.
Do not hope.
nor love you.
nor love you.
And I would encourage each of us, I presume each of us, I didn't know who was going to be here, but I encourage each of us to pray this prayer frequently every day. I mean, it's this very short prayer, very simple prayer, but we can say it every day for the increasing number of people in our culture who don't believe and who are out to destroy Christianity. Now I will turn our attentions to the interviews of people who were present and saw the miracle. I rely on the book by John Hafford, Meet the Witnesses. The first eyewitness, Mr. Dominic Reese of Hollyhock, Massachusetts, was in Portugal in 1917. He was 17 years old and lived about 100 miles from Fatima. On the 11th, his father said to his mother, "We're going to go to Fatima." Many people in the area were interested, and some, like the government, thought it was all lies. The priests did not talk about it, lest something might happen to them. Plus, priests in general are usually very skeptical about things like that anyway. So on the 12th, he and his parents traveled by train, and the train was full. The next morning, on the 13th, they left the Yore, however you say the name of the town, walking in a light rain. Everywhere he looked, there were people, all climbing the mountain, just like nothing at all. Some did not expect to see anything, saying nothing would happen. Many walked in silence. After walking for more than 5 hours, they reached the summit, ready to descend to the hollow known as the cova, where the miracle was to take place. However, they met one more obstacle. Soldiers with swords and drawn bayonets, fixed bayonets. But the crowd was too great for the soldiers to hold. They broke through it first at one corner, then at the other, and the soldiers couldn't control the crowd. At this point in the interview, Mr. Reese shows Hafford the scar on his hand from the wound inflicted by the bayonet of one of those soldiers. As they reached the spot about 75 to 100 yards from where the vision was to take place, the children were already there. It was raining harder now. Remember, they started walking in a light rain. It was raining harder now. And there was a good 3 inches of water in the ground where he was standing. Now it started raining harder, just like you open a faucet in your house, he said. Rain. And then suddenly the rain stopped. We can see the sun. It started to roll from one place to another and change blue, yellow, all colors. Then we see the sun come towards the children, towards the tree. Everyone was hollering out. Some confessed their sins out loud so all could hear, because there was no priest around there. His mother grabbed him to her and started crying, saying, "It's the end of the world." As the sun began to fall, he was distracted by the noise around him. Afterwards, he was told that the sun had turned upon itself and was falling down. As to the water, as soon as the sun went back to the right place, the wind started to blow real hard. But the trees didn't move at all. The wind blew real hard, and in a few minutes the ground was as dry as the floor here, and he stamped his foot on the floor where he was being interviewed. Our clothes were dry and looked as though they had just come from the laundry. Hafford notes that while Mr. Reese was speaking, he was leaning forward in his chair, deeply moved by the vivid memory. Hafford says, "We used extensive photographs of Mr. Reese to show his face and eyes as he recalled what happened. However, unfortunately, the photos fall short of the reality. Copies of those are in the handout too." there's a picture of him, and then a picture of him during the interview with his eyes and all that kind of stuff. Each witness interviewed 43 years after the event. His interviews took place around 1960. So 43 years after the event, each of the witnesses interviewed recalls what happened as though it was yesterday. I have included in the handouts a table of contents to show the range, the scope of his research. Let's see. His chapters on communism, the atheist, effects on Portugal, the witness who could not believe, and the Red Star Strike Back, I think are particularly interesting, as is the chapter on the miracle lessons. Are you aware that Our Lady told Lucille that the miracle would have been greater, but it was lessened because of what the administrator of Orm had done in arresting the children? And the administrator, of course, is the witness who could not believe. So the miracle was lessened because of their arrest. Besides the 33 witnesses who were present at the Cova, Hafford interviewed others who witnessed the miracle from a distance. It could be seen in an area about 600 square miles. Some people were 30 miles away and saw the miracle. Maria de Capellana lived in Noita, about a mile from the Cova. Speaking of the crowd, already large the day before the miracle, she testifies, there were so many people that it was hard to believe. They made such noise that I could hear them even as far away as my own village, which was a mile away. They had to sleep out in the open, completely uncovered, because there was no shelter at the Cova. Her testimony, like all the others, are essentially in agreement with the touch of individuality and choice of words, which show their testimony to be personal. From thousands of witnesses, Hafford chose witnesses of every possible age, of every possible class, of those inclined to believe and those who were not, those who were educated scientists and those who could neither read nor write. His detailed interrogations clarified other points which before had been obscured even to him, such as the sudden clarity of the atmosphere, the wind which moved across the mountain without touching the trees and suddenly dried everything. Hafford said for years he wasn't sure about these, thinking they might be just stories or side effects of people imagining things. But he says the interviews have emerged, these things have emerged very clearly from the individual. One particular fact that bothered me as I was doing this was, what time of the day did the miracle happen? Hafford notes that when asked about the time of the miracle, answers were invariably vague. One of the people present at the Cova was Dr. Jose Garrett, a professor from the Faculty of Sciences at the University of Coimbra. He made careful notes of what he observed almost minute by minute according to the official time standard. The government had decreed to coordinate the time in Portugal with what was going on in the war. So just like we have daylight saving time, they had an official time. And according to the official time, the miracle took place at 1:30. But according to solar time, it was at high noon. So Now, Dr. Garrett, you have this little map that Hefford made of the cova, with the modern basilica right above it. But the cova, as he points out, was 500 feet wide and 1,000 feet long and could accommodate 300,000 people. That's just in the cova, not around the other way. But if you see number 3 down on the bottom circle, that's where Dr. Garrett was standing. So he was above, and he had binoculars, so he could see down to where the vision took place. And he was so impressed with the number of people that he counted people near him and then divided the area around, and that's where he came up with 100,000 people there. And whenever Hefford talks about the number, he uses that number because he thinks Garrett is the most precise of the estimators. And you can see where he shows where all 33 people that he interviewed were standing at the time of the miracle. Hefford writes of a chasm between merely believing in the miracle and the actual realization that it happened, not just as a historical event, but as a crucial reaching out of God to the frightened heart of humanity. It was a warning. Look around. With clear eyes. Are you not frightened by what you see? What humanity is doing to itself? I wasn't sure who was going to be here. Right now I'm probably preaching to the choir, but we see that mankind is on the verge of destroying itself. Culturally, if not physically, but possibly physically. The first thing the lady showed the children was a vision of hell. The miracle of the Son was that all might believe. It was frightening. I just thought of this phrase. It's like God is trying to scare the hell out of us. And saying to us, it's going to be worse unless people start praying, doing penance for their sins, giving alms to the poor, and converting. Every one of us has to convert. War, Mary said, is caused by sin. The error of communist atheism and relativism, secularism, is spreading like a cancer, fomenting war after war after war. Nations will be annihilated unless men stop offending God. Nations have already been annihilated. The miracle, the red light in the sky that I saw when I was 7 years old was a warning that another war worse than the First World War was coming. It came. We're not finished yet. You know, the end of that war was the atomic bomb. Now we have hydrogen bombs, and we have crazy people developing them. If anybody looks around and is not scared, they're blind. There's no one so blind as those who will not see. So, nations will be annihilated unless men stop offending God. I believe America will be annihilated. Maybe not, the land will still be here, but what we understand as America will not be. The world has received an ultimatum. Would it not be sad, this is Hefford saying this, would it not be sad if religious prejudice, like the skeptics, or the sheer weight of secularism and our own indifference. We're to prevent the world from realizing the staggering fact. Let us pray. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. O my Jesus,
Forgive us our sins, save us from the fires of hell. Lead all souls to heaven, especially those most in need of our mercy.
I always like to point out, the prayer says, forgive us our sins, save us from the fires of hell, lead all sinners to heaven, and then it talks about the wicked. I mean, it talks about those most in need of God's mercy. And those, in my mind, are the wicked. And the wicked are those whose heart speaks to the wicked, so they don't even know that they are sinners. So they don't even think about repenting. And it's the wicked who are destroying us. Not because they are so evil as compared to me, but because they are puppets of Satan and the relativism of lies, like choice, same-sex marriage, marriage equality. These are all lies, satanic lies, of the dictatorship of relativism that is destroying America. Now, I was going to read it, but I don't need to read it. In your handout, I don't know if you've ever seen this. I've often wondered about it, but never really looked for it. The page you just turned over, the last page on the thing, is what the newspapers in Portugal said about, they were witnesses, and what they said about the miracle. And they said a lot more than this, but I just condensed it. There were two newspapers. One was called the Daily News, the other one the Century. And it seems to me from reading these, the Daily News was at the Cova. The Century was at Orm, or however you say that name. So it was further away. But the descriptions are very much similar. And they're certainly very similar to what people like Mr. V said, but some of it is more precise than, because they were reporters. And some of it seems to me they were beginning, before this happened, as they were talking about all the people coming, it seemed to me they might be setting it up to say, ha, 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 nothing happened. But once it happened, they're talking about the miracle. They're talking about the sun acted against all cosmic laws. So, but then after 4 days, they went back to being anti-religious and putting down Saddam. God bless you.